Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's see if we can get me larger, just because then when I show things, it's easier to see. And at the same time, we may have difficulty doing that. If you're on the other end, if you can go to speaker view, I think you can enlarge me so that if I show you something, it's easier to read. We've sent out a paper and we understand that not everyone will have it, but if you do, it'd be nice if you've been able to print it out. And as we go along, you can fill in different parts of the sentences, just so you have a complete understanding of the concepts. We start off by just saying, golly, IEP meetings is such a challenge, and yet it is so important, because as a parent, you're trying to represent your son or daughter and trying to do the best negotiation and demands that you can of the school system. Just so you know, I've sent the same paper to the head of special education directors of our Clark County school districts so that they have it. And can I ask Brenda and Elizabeth, can you see me large, because I'm still small and up over in the corner?
I see you large if I pin you to speaker.
Yeah, I see large, but I do see that on after I select speaker view, if I hover over everybody else's pictures on the side, I can choose show active speaker video, show thumbnail video.
There it goes.
Show grid video. So if you choose show active speaker video, it should work.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, how are we going to go about talking about effective IEPs? Quick background. I'm an educational consultant. I taught in California, Oregon, and Washington. My last 8 years were in Battleground. Self-contained 8th grade teacher, previously taught high school. Worked a lot with special needs students and go in the classrooms in different cities and different states, helping them understand communication. Communication, about 80% of it is going to be based on your nonverbals. So to help us understand that, we have what's called the 4 categories of nonverbal communication. The big V just stands for visual. So mostly what you do with your eye contact is critical in terms of communication, especially if you have some volatile information you need to address. The second category of nonverbal communication is called the auditory, and it's your voice patterns. And on the paper behind me, these are the outcomes that we're going to actually make sure that you walk away with. Number 1, when you make eye contact, the change that it does in your chemicals in your body, as well as the educator, is unbelievably important to understand. The auditory is 2 different voice patterns. One is called being credible, and the other one's called being approachable. And we're going to cover that to make sure you have it. Now, it may sound funny, but your voice patterns are a result of what you're doing with your body. So technical word for body or below the neck is called kinesthetic. You just know it as body language. The most important area is if you're breathing well during the conference, and especially in preparation for meeting with the educator. Please really consider how to control your own emotions during the conference. Makes a huge difference in terms of how successful you are. Quick bio. We're going to see in just a little bit here a 2-minute clip from YouTube, and it's just video footage of me as a youngster. It's going to be in black and white. I'm 80 years old this week, so I want to make sure that you understand this is not going to be glamour. This is going to be old home footage of what I looked like as a youngster. I graduated from high school at the 4th grade reading level, but I went to parochial school, so they didn't have special education. So I was never diagnosed for how I could have been diagnosed. So I'm going to suggest that I'm ADHD, OCD, left-handed, and dyslexic. So you can see my handwriting, at least it goes uphill, even though it's not straight. By the way, if you ever notice that about people, statistically, it means that they're optimistic. If the slant goes uphill, they're optimistic. So watch your sons and daughters. terms of their handwriting. I live on a tree farm in Battleground right next to the lake, and I'm blessed to have all the branches of my family be living nearby. This last weekend, we had a wonderful wedding. I got to be the officiant for my grandson, who married just a wonderful family that comes from Arizona. So we just danced all night in terms of having a good time celebrating their get together. This summer, I presented in 6 different states. So we're opening up a little bit in terms of COVID, and just very pleased that we get to be in person. Now, we're going to show a 2-minute clip from YouTube. I recommend that you show other people, or at least recommend the clip to them, because it gives them a little more optimism that even though they struggle in school, perhaps as students, it doesn't mean what they're going to end up being after they finish. So at 20 years old, I taught myself how to read. And I taught myself, because of my bad handwriting, how to do keyboarding. It's called typing back then. And that really helped me a great deal. I have a master's degree and I've written 14 books, and they've been translated into 7 languages. I'm very blessed to present on 5 different continents and get to understand cultural differences as I travel the world. Number one thing, if I can recommend in terms of raising kids, travel. And if you can, not as a tourist. If you can, get off the main drag where all the shops are, go 2 streets over, and then encounter culture. Make sure you're safe at all times, but it makes a huge difference in terms of opening up your mind, because then you realize the world doesn't think like you think. The world thinks like however it thinks. So at this time, can we show the 2-minute clip from YouTube called Mikey Grinder? Elizabeth, thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
You got to see it twice.
Yeah, sure.
We have a paper that we're going to go along and fill in. And if you want, it just helps you remember a lot of what we're going to be covering. So the very first one we're going to talk about is eye contact. When you make eye contact with another human being, it increases your emotions, both in the person who is sending the eye contact and the one who's receiving whatever the communication is. So if you have anything that's positive, make eye contact. But if you have something that's negative, it's better not to make eye contact. We'll talk more about that as we go along. Now, the technical term for when you make eye contact with another human being is here's one person Here's another. It's called two-point communication. Why? Because there's two people involved. So if we took two people and they're looking at each other, that means that whatever they're saying, if it's positive, it's increasing the positive. But if it's negative, it's increasing the negative. So if you can, try to understand 2-point has to be reserved for positive interactions. And when you can't say anything positive, and you have to say something that's could be explosive, the technical term for that is called 3-point. So it says what to do when saying something that could explode. The answer is to go visual. Write it down. Before you go to the conference, make sure you have notes. If you have to type them out if you can. Now, that means you have to come to the conference with written information. Oral information does not last. It doesn't stick. You don't have a memory of what we agreed to. So please go visual. And it starts with your preparation. Now, the name of, when you have the two people looking at each other, that's called 2-point communication. If the parent or the teacher looks at a piece of paper and they start looking at the paper together, you now have 3 entities, the two people plus the paper. So the opposite of eye contact is called 3-point communication. I'll give you an example. I travel a lot, and it's really important that when I check into a hotel and they want to know information and what my confirmation is, a lot of times people will say what that confirmation number is. If you show it to them, so much faster, so much quicker, and so much more accurate. So please go visual whenever you can. We have 2 different voice patterns. They're produced by how our body moves. And here's what you're going to find. The first pattern, when the head is still, I'm going to go sideways. If my head is still, and if my palm is down, and if I drop my chin at the end of any sentences or paragraphs, I'm producing what's called credibility. Credibility is anytime you have a head that is still and then the chin drops at the end of whatever you say. Now, the opposite of that is called approachability. And I'll go the other way just so we can see the opposite. If your head is bobbing and your palm is up and your voice drops up, curls up at the end, whatever you're saying, it automatically makes you more approachable. So when I go to Australia, I always call them the cheaters, because their whole voice pattern is they can keep their head still and still have their voice go up and down. So people love Australians. Why? They always seem friendly. They always seem friendly. Why? Voice pattern. So approachability and credibility are your 2 kinds of voice patterns. Now, what does it mean? The credible voice sends information. The approachable voice seeks information. So if you want to have a topic, a dialogue, a discussion with someone, and you say, I'd like to talk to you about, and you use a credible voice pattern the whole time, the person will not talk. They will clam up. But if you go like this and you talk to them like this, they'll absolutely get along with you. Now, there's a difference between males and females. So if I may, you need to understand, males are trained at very early ages to be John Wayne. John Wayne never bobs his head up and down, Pilgrim. They talk like this the whole time. So you got to make sure you understand, if you're a male, when to bob your head. So when I finish at 8:30 tonight and I go in the house, I will thank my wife for letting me be out here in the office and serving our community. But I know what she's going to do. She's going to say, how was it? She'll bob her head. How was it? How many people were on the line? And I have to remember, as a male, I can't go, it was really good. I have to say, it was really good. Because if I say it was really good, that means I don't want to talk. But if I say it was really good, we'll talk longer than I'd like. But I'm talking because of my marriage, not because of the topic. So if I may, teach your sons, train your husbands, bob your head when you're asking, how was your day? And it makes a nice difference. The approachable voice, bottom of page 2, it invites dialogue. If you say, what do you think? versus what do you think? So if 80% of your communication is going to be your voice pattern, you've got to make sure that you know, hey, if I want a dialogue, come on, talk to me in a way that invites me to respond back. Going on to page 3. There are some cross-cultural misinterpretations, and I just want to point them out just because it happens without us being fully aware of it. And I'm going to bring some people in here. Here we go. Thank you for joining us. This is so nice. Here's what you're going to find. If we have 2 males talking to each other, and whoever is talking is John Wayne, and the other one is a listening John Wayne, he will not misinterpret the lack of nodding because he's a male also. What we get in trouble is when we have cross-gender communication. So please be aware, if we have 2 females talking to each other, it's perfectly okay because they will tend to interpret the behavior of the listener in exactly the way it was meant. We have 2 males talking to each other, perfectly okay. We get in trouble when we do cross-cultural. So in this case, please forgive, best I could find, we're going to pretend this is a Hispanic male. If you have any good Hispanic males and females, please let me know where I can buy them. If we have a Hispanic male and he is talking to a Caucasian female, the amount of miscommunication goes up. So it's both cross-cultural in terms of ethnicity, but it's also cross-cultural in terms of gender. And we have different age groups, different generations, so different in terms of how they're communicating now compared to how they did 20 years ago. Post-pandemic, you've got to take whatever your age of your child is, subtract 2.5 years, and now you know the emotional, social level of your son or daughter. They have missed out being around other people in a group setting. So their manners are not the same as their chronological age. And we have to teach them what it means to be polite, wait your turn, please, thank you, all of those. So on your paper, what it says is, when the Hispanic person, male or female, when they talk, they have a rolling kind of head, their voice pattern, because their head goes up and down. The Caucasian person will interpret the Hispanic person as what they're saying is not very serious because it's so friendly. Well, you got to get used to what is the baseline of a culture. So if I may, if you take in general the valley that we live in, starting way down past Salem, all the way up here, about 65% of the population that goes to school are Hispanic. So we've got to start understanding how to interpret that kind of communication. The second thing is, please be aware that the female voice tends to be higher and lighter when they talk, and they tend to move their chin up. Now, I live out in some acreage. We're a tree farm out here in Battleground. And if my wife comes out the back door and she wants to catch me in the bar 40, she will tend to go like this, Michael, Michael. And if I don't hear her, she'll go like this, Michael, Michael. So if you can, females, be careful. When you go into stress, you tend to bring your chin up higher. You got to bring it down. You got to go the opposite of what seems like intuitive. Now let's go to the listening styles. So this is again on page 3. When a Hispanic parent is listening and the female Caucasian educator is talking, he will tend to keep his head still because he's probably in a second language, English. She will tend to interpret the fact that he's not nodding his head because the Caucasian male doesn't nod his head also, but you expect that. But from the Hispanic, you expect him to nod his head. He may not be because he's trying to concentrate on what's being said. When a female talks to a male educator, there's something that's really weird that happens. He's afraid that if he bobs his head, makes encouraging sounds, he'll be interpreted as, I agree with what you're saying. Holy cow. So the amount of misinterpretation is unbelievably high. Now, in the middle of page 3, what we recommend is this. Hey, you can listen and talk any way you want, as long as you indicate to the other person how to accurately interpret you. Example, if you are someone who bobs your head all the time, female, all you have to do is say, people tell me that when I listen, I bob my head. I want you to know that I'm bobbing my head to encourage our conversation. It doesn't necessarily mean I agree with what you're saying. Get that elephant out in the room right now. So whatever your style is, make sure that they interpret your style accurately, and then you'll be okay. Same thing as a male. If a male is listening and he's not bobbing his head, all he has to do is say, people tell me that I tend not to bob when I'm listening. I want you to know I'm concentrating on what you're saying. It doesn't necessarily mean that I disagree with you at all. So middle of page 3, get the elephant out. However you listen, however you talk, make sure you give the other person the correct interpretation of it. If you have a bilingual translator, whoa, this happens all the time. You end up having someone here who's going to help with the translation between 2 different voice patterns, or especially language patterns. When the person talks to the Hispanic, he has to bob his head so it matches the style. But when he translates to the Caucasian educator what was said by the Hispanic parent, they have to hold their head still. So a good translator understands how to switch their voice patterns based on which party they're talking to. Okay. Now let's start putting together some of our nonverbals. What would happen if you're in a conference and even if it was the same gender conference, or sometimes you have 2 parents there, a male and a female, what you're going to find is the following. If you, as the parent, look directly at the person and do that flat voice pattern, they will misinterpret you as hostile and aggressive. The amount of cooperation is shot. So understanding when to be approachable and when to be credible, wow, that is so cool. And what it is going to be based on when you make eye contact and when you don't. If you make the eye contact, then please be approachable. If you go to a third point and you have a paper you're showing the educator, you can be as credible as you want to be. Looking down at a paper and going, this is what my son needs. My daughter's abilities are. That's perfectly okay. But to go like this is what my son, oh man, oh, you're just in trouble. You're just in trouble. So that's why you have to go visually prepared. You have to have something written out. It makes a huge difference in terms of the communication. So now we're on page 4. So here's what we're going to suggest. And I'm going to ask the 3 or 4 people that are with me right now, if you would do this with me, just so that we can memorize it. And I absolutely believe in muscle memory. So practicing something, and it goes like this. There's a chart that goes like this. If the content is positive, please make eye contact and use an approachable voice. So if you would, let me do it one more time, then I'm going to ask you to join me. Again, let me do it alone. If the content is positive, go ahead and make eye contact and use an approachable voice. Now, if you would, join me. Take your arms and make the plus sign and just go like this. If the content is positive, you say that to yourself. Make eye contact and have an approachable voice, and just nod your head as you say an approachable voice. That's it. Now look at the second line in there. Let me do it alone. If the content is negative, you've got to look at a third point. Now you have the option of being extremely credible with what you want to say. They're only offended when you make eye contact and are credible. So if you would join me, make a dash sign. When the content is negative, look at a third point and be as credible as you want to be, and you'll be absolutely fine. So it's really helpful to understand. You've got to take care of yourself, and you hope that the person that's across the table next to you is taking care of themselves. I want to introduce an idea that's called the Q-tip, and it's in your paper here. If you want, please consider putting a Q-tip in your pocket if you're going to go to a conference, IEP 504, and you think it's going to be perhaps difficult. Here's what you want to do with the Q-tip. It stands for quit taking it personally. Quit taking it personally. Because as soon as you take it personally, it's not going to go well. Now, from the teacher side, we recommend that they turn over the Q-tip because it has a little two-ended and quietly take it professionally. This is the number one thing that we're teaching teachers, educators. Two ends. By the way, if you have any teenagers, it's a Q-tip at least every other day. Very different. So, you know, my kids are all gone and raised. No, they're not. I'm a grandparent. They keep dropping them off. We keep having family picnics. So I promise, Q-tipping is something that you just have to really understand how to do, and it'll make a nice difference. Now let's look on page 4, and we're going to be looking at how to sit yourself in such a way so that you have a better chance of good communication. So let me get something here. Isn't this great? I'm a professional, gets paid to play with dolls. Oh, sorry, teacher. If you sit across the table from someone else, if everything is positive communication, you're perfectly okay. Why? When you sit across from each other, you make eye contact. Well, how do we sit? Well, if you can, it's not always easy. But if you can arrange to sit at 90 degrees from each other, then you put the paper, the concerns, the volatility on the paper in front of them. So pretend if the parent is bringing out the paper, put the parent in front of the teacher. Make sure you have a copy in front of you too. Then you can always take your hand and point to blah, 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 which item on the paper you want to talk about. That's 3 point. Oh, you can push for what your son or daughter needs, but do it without eye contact. As soon as you make eye contact, I promise we're not doing this anymore. The amount of defensiveness that occurs on both parties, both the parent and the educator. We're in a world of hurt right now in terms of education. Not an excuse, just a description. They still have a responsibility, and parents, you have a responsibility to make sure that they do their legal obligations. But we just have shortage. I checked into a hotel in Nashville 2 weeks ago, working with the educational system there. And the hotel I checked into was Maxwell House Coffee. So it's an absolutely historical place. And the woman seemed a little haggard behind the counter as I signed in. And I asked her, how you doing? She says, oh, I've been here 16 hours. Supply chain. We just don't have people that can relieve us of our obligations. Education is so short. I can't even present to teachers. Why? Because they don't have enough substitutes to pull the teachers out of the classroom. So who do I present to? Administrators. Because they don't need as badly a substitute. So please understand, be careful, 90 degrees. Now let's look at 90 degrees, because you could be on this side here and be at 90 degrees. This is the parent, or you could be over here. And what's the difference? If you are right-handed, you always want your dominant hand, I'm going to put her other hand down. You always want your dominant hand closest to the person who's going to receive the communication. Why? Because when you go to point to the paper, you will turn your body. So you'd be less likely to make eye contact. Whereas if you're over here and you're right-handed, as you point to the paper, doggone it, you're back to 2 point. So if I can, please understand, it's not just 90 degrees, it's 90 degrees with a dominant hand closest to the recipient of whatever the information is that you want them to hear. Bottom of page 4. When you look at a picture, the color around the frame makes a huge difference in terms of what you see. So the way that you want to start off any kind of a conference is set a positive frame. Set a cooperative frame. And when you do, I promise it's going to go much, much better. Now, how do you do the cooperative frame? If you go to page 5, there's a title at the top. And what it basically says is, every person, whether it be the parent, or in this case, the educator, they're playing 2 roles. They're both a human being, that they're a person, but they're also a position, educator, parent. Now, what you have, if you want, please always understand, if you're the parent, and we hope that the teacher would do this also, please acknowledge the human being that is in a position of representing the school system. And we hope that the educator would do the same thing. It's not just that you're a human being, you have a role, a responsibility, and a challenge to represent the needs of your child. When you can both address the person and the position, whenever you are dealing with something that's volatile, my goodness, the amount of cooperation that you get is unbelievably high. So, if I may, if you can just say something like, and it's written here in the paper for you, I can only imagine what you might have to juggle to assist me. I appreciate your effort. Please really understand. Walk in their moccasins, whatever your favorite expression is. Please understand, we need a cooperative framework. If they said that to us, oh my goodness, that'd be so nice as parents. What a difference it makes. The last area we want to go into is the decision-making process. The decision-making process has a couple of things in mind, and we're going to show you what those are, just so you have a sense of them. Excuse me a second. Here's what we're going to suggest is the decision-making process. Most of us understand about being Jedi warriors from Star Wars. Be Jedi warriors. And these are the 4 frames or pauses or phases of the decision-making process. The first one is gathering information. Then you're going to evaluate. then you're going to decide, and then you're going to implement. Please always think of which process are we in right now? Is this just a gathering phase? That's the first one. Is this an evaluating and deciding phase? Or have we already done that and we're talking about the implementation? And right now we don't have the luxury of implementing as well as we wish we could. So please respect the person in their position as you're talking about all of this. Now that's what page 5 is talking about. So here's what we suggest. When you are gathering information, please be really approachable, nod that head. Come on, WD-40 right in the neck. Get that head going up and up. Yeah. Why? There's no decision yet. There's no value put on it yet. You're just, what about? And if you can, take notes. Take notes. Now, when you get to the evaluating, now you have to go more third point. You have to be more credible. So please, 2-point approachable, 3-point credible. Always take notes on any decisions that are made. Try to get deadlines on the implementation. Makes a huge, huge difference. Any agreements that we make, write them down. If you have the wherewithal, if you can, just take whatever your notes are. If you have the time, and I know a lot of us are very, very busy, but type them up. Send them to the evaluator and go to the educator. This is what I think we said. Can you agree with this? Send me a note back confirming. If you think it's different, please let me know. Get it in writing. Anything in writing will stick. Now on page 6, we introduced a different concept to you. Page 6 talks about what's called the 3 variables of any negotiation. It's called who has the power, who has the information, and who has the time. Don't you dare think that you're the parent and therefore you have no power. You might not, but you have the I and the T. Come on, anyone who's ever raised a 10-year-old at the dinner table, you say, how was your day? They will share all the information they want. They'll spend time with you. They love you. Then they become 13 and 14. You ask them, how's your day? Fine. Anything good happen? No. What are they doing? They're counterbalancing what an adolescent thinks is the parent's power with withholding information and time. They play it. And once you get there, you go, oh, got it. Now I understand what's going on. I mean, my kids have kids, and some of their kids have kids. So I have 3 great-grandchildren. My children will come to me and say, hey, Grandpa, I want you to talk to my son about blah, blah, blah. And why am I doing it? Because I'm part of the village. It takes a whole village. If you don't have a village, you've got to build it. You got to build it. And if I may, one of the most important people in the village are the educators of your sons and daughters. Appreciations, cooperation. Golly, what a difference it makes. So it's amazing to me. I was finishing up a meal we had on the 4th of July, big get together. And I was in the kitchen and I was doing the dishes. And one of my sons sent his kids in to relieve Grandpa. They didn't come in and relieve me. They sent their kids in to relieve me. It's a village. As long as we understand village, we're okay. Now, here's what we're going to suggest. If this is something that you like, and on the back we explain what all those words mean, more than happy to send it to you. Just write me at Michael, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, Michael, at michaelgrinder.com, or even better, let me send it to Brenda and Elizabeth. You keep it in your file and you manufacture it all you want. I recommend you laminate it. Because it helps you figure out, where am I, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And it's just a great one. Leaders love this. Leaders love this. Corporate education doesn't matter. If I'm gathering information, I want to figure out who has the power, who has the information, who has the time. And if I may, I strongly suggest power is not the most important of the three variables. It's time. We don't have enough time. Now, when you come over to evaluating, it may shift who has the power, who has the information, who has the time. Deciding and implementation. Implementation, a lot of times, they have the power, but you also have power. If they're not following through, it's called the law. But go third point visual. Don't you dare. Come on. Now, I tell a story in terms of, because I travel so much. I'll be at a ticket counter. I've already checked in. My bag's already been taken. I'm at the gate and now they canceled the flight. So now we have to go back up and go, well, what do we do? And I see people that are very frustrated and angry, and rightly so, because they were promised a certain implementation and it didn't work. And they come up and they're doing the proverbial finger with the clerk behind the counter. I'm saying, what a fool. That's the only person that can advocate for you. And you're going to act this way towards them? Come on. You've got to understand, when you're talking to the educator, they can help you, but you got to be respectful. You can absolutely disagree with the educator, but make sure you do it through a third point. If you want to point out what the law is, not accusatory, just indicate, but you've got to have that law in writing. Come on, visual. It makes all the difference in the world. So if I may, this is something that I just think is a gold mine in terms of understanding what's going on and where am I and what can I do about it. Now we're going to take about a 5-minute break. Then we're going to come back, and if you have any questions or comments, love to open it up and we'll talk about it. But if I may, you need to move, maybe get a little bit glass of water here, and we'll see you back in 5 minutes. Thank you so much.